This is Democracy Watch. Mark, all eyes are on Wisconsin right now, where we have a Supreme Court race coming up on April 1st. Really important race with major implications, not just for Wisconsin itself, but the whole country more broadly. And I say that because Elon Musk is effectively trying to buy this election. I'm going to put a tweet right here on the screen that Elon posted. On Sunday night, I will give a talk in Wisconsin. Entrance is limited to those who have voted in the Supreme Court election. I will also personally hand over 2 checks for $1 million each in appreciation for you taking the time to vote. This is super important. Now, this mirrors a strategy that Elon pulled in Pennsylvania as well, and obviously the legality here is dubious at best. So can you speak on that? Is it legal to hand out lump sums, payments to voters in exchange for their participation in an election?
All right. So look, before we get to the pure legal question, I think we can't lose the forest from the trees. How absolutely abnormal it is.
Yeah.
Like how absolutely crazy that we are having to record a video and explain to people that it is wrong for a billionaire, the richest person in the world, I think still, to be in a state Supreme Court race, holding an event in which he is going to hand out $1 million payments to people who have voted. Brian, this is nuts.
Yeah.
This is absolutely corrosive to democracy.
It's dystopian.
It's dystopian, right? It is dystopian. It is so far, you and I often talk about these things, and you ask about the shifting of the Overton window.
Right.
Several years ago, I can't remember whether it was the first Obama election or the second Obama election, the right wing got very angry. Wait for it. The right wing got very angry with Starbucks, because Starbucks said they would give a free cup of coffee to people who showed up with an I voted sticker. Yeah. And the right wing was convinced that Starbucks was in the bag for Obama because it was a coffee house.
In retrospect, what I realize now is Starbucks shouldn't have handed out coffee. They should have handed out $1 million checks to people. And then the right wingers would have been completely fine with it.
Right. And so Starbucks had to essentially, as I recall, walk it back and be like, oh, we are, anyone can come in that day and get a cup of coffee. We're not trying to buy voting. And here we are now on the eve of a state Supreme Court election in the state of Wisconsin. And the richest man in the world is doing this. Now, to your question about the law. The federal vote buying statute doesn't apply because this relates to state law, but every state has laws like this. And in Wisconsin, they have a law that makes it a crime to offer anything of value to a voter to induce them to vote or refrain from voting. Okay. So it doesn't matter whether you're voting for a candidate or not. You cannot make a payment to induce someone to vote or refrain from voting. So the question here is, does that inducement statute also cover rewards after the fact? Well, I'm not an expert, particularly in this statute, but I think common sense says it probably does. And here's why. Because voting is still going on, right? So it is an inducement to people to vote because they can then vote and then come to this event.
Right.
And so do I think it's illegal under Wisconsin law? I suspect it is. I think it will be certainly looked at. But whether it is criminally prosecuted or not criminally prosecuted it is, as you say, it is completely dystopian.
Now, that obviously raises the question that it doesn't change the fact that the impacts that it'll have on this election will already be in the bag. And so it feels like we're just kind of chasing this stuff after the fact. It's not going to matter whether there's some litigation once the Supreme Court race has already taken place. And so is there a concern that even if what he's doing is illegal, these people are so content to abuse the legal system, knowing full well that if they've already gotten what they need out of it, then it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, this is what I worry about. If there is one dominant theme of where we are today in America, it is this. And it's something you and I have talked about. I have praised you on some of your social media posts making this point, which is, I'll admit it. The reason I know about the Starbucks thing is I was one of these lawyers who was like, oh, wait, no, there's a Starbucks offer. And what will this mean? Will we be accused of, right? And so that's the Democratic perspective. Yeah. And here you know, your point about like get a new parliamentarian, right? Here we have it where Elon Musk is like, oh wait, I'm going to do it, and maybe there'll be litigation, maybe there won't, but the election will be over, right?
Right.
So look, I have grown as a lawyer then, and I think no one would say that right now I am overly worried about norms,
Yeah.
and I challenge them and I litigate, and Democracy Docket is fearless in its journalism as you are. But I do think that it is one of the challenges that we face right now across all of the cases, all of the litigation, and frankly, probably even in the broader culture, is this sense that the Republicans are not just shifting the Overton window, they're just sort of like ignoring the Overton window
Right.
and then just like letting it realign. And all we can do is call it out, and what the lawyers need to do is to be aggressive. And so, Josh Call, the Attorney General of Wisconsin, or the local DAs, whoever has jurisdiction here, I'm sure will look at this. But we cannot have a world in which Merrick Garland, on his way out of the Department of Justice, says my greatest accomplishment was we adhered to norms, only to be replaced by Pam Bondi, who's like, oh, wait, there was a signal chat over bombing. Yeah, no, we're not going to investigate that.
Right, right. Well, we do have Ben Wickler, who is the chair of the Wisconsin Democrats, coming out and saying that his payment is a blatant felony. So does that give you some reassurance in the sense that these folks are taking what Elon is doing seriously and not looking, at least from the indication that we have right now, not looking to just let this slide by?
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, I'm sure the Democratic Party of Wisconsin will not let it slide by. I am sure the Democrats in the state will fight hard. I am sure that there will be lawyers who fight hard on this. I'm not accusing anyone of not fighting hard, and I think that there has been a shift in mindset, and I do think that shift is going on. But I want to also acknowledge what, like I said, you have really been very prescient on. You have really been early to this, to recognize that part of Trump's superpower, part of the thing that Republicans are able to do, is to simply sort of brush off the criticism and also brush off the law. They detain someone, and the judge says don't move them out of the state, and then they move them out of the state, and it's like, oh, Your Honor, it's too late. They're no longer in the state, and like that. I'm not commending that, and I'm not saying that Democrats need to replicate lawlessness. But I do think that it poses a real challenge right now in this moment, in which you do have that asymmetry, and we need Democrats to fight hard. We need progressive media to be unafraid. We need Democratic organizations to be unafraid. We need progressives to be willing to be more aggressive. And again, it's something I try to do in my daily life and in my practice and with Democracy Docket. But I don't think we can view this Elon Musk thing in Wisconsin as just a one-off. Like, it's not like just in one race, one billionaire decided to do one thing. I think it is part of this larger shift of how they view, Brian, it's not my area of expertise, so I'm sure you have covered it or will. But I read that they may break the Social Security Administration.
Yeah.
They may and like, can you imagine a Democrat? Like, Democrats wouldn't change a piece of punctuation in the Social Security Administration's homepage,
Yeah.
right, without fear. And the Republicans are willing to do that, and we need to be as aggressive in litigating and in fighting back in court. And I think Ben Wickler is the right guy.
I want to dig into that point a little bit because I think this is important. The way that Republicans are barreling ahead by, for example, touching this third rail in American politics, which is Social Security, that suggests yes that they may just want to break things, but I think in a more insidious view of this, it could suggest that these are people who are operating as if they're not going to face voters again. I mean, I think if you ask either one of us, like, the notion that you are going to put Social Security on the chopping block, the notion that you're going to put Medicaid on the chopping block, the notion that you're going to put food stamps on the chopping block, like, these are all wildly popular programs. I mean, you want to talk about being on the wrong side of a 95-5 issue, meaning 95% of Americans support this stuff. That's what the Republicans are doing right now. And so does this offer some insight into maybe how Republicans are viewing upcoming elections, the fact that they are being so willing to do something that in a normal world would really be a one-way ticket to get voted out of office?
Yeah, I think they're counting on two things. I mean, the first is I think we are going to see an unprecedented attack on free and fair elections in 2026. And I think they know that. I think they are planning it. I think they're planning. I mean, Donald Trump issued an executive order to try to engage in a gross unconstitutional takeover of federal elections, right?
Right.
So we know they are going to target the elections. I am not in the school of people who say we're not going to have elections. We will have elections. But I think that the question of how free and fair they are is a whole other question. And that, I think, is where they're going. That's number one. But number two, and this is where it ties together. I mean, I think that they just figure, look, between what we can do with the election rules, what we can do with who can vote and who doesn't, but what we can do with whose vote gets counted and doesn't get counted, when we layer on top of that the fact that we can just have a billionaire spend an ungodly amount of money to just flood the system in ways that are not like anything we have seen before. I think they just figure, like, when you take that all together, they like their odds. And, it's part of my job is to fight the first part of that in court, and we will do that. I've done that before, and we're going to continue to do that. Part of the second part, though, is for everyone to understand what is going on. Like, there needs to be as many voters who say, I will not vote for a candidate because of this, as there are people who will show up at a rally because the candidate has a financial supporter doing this. Right. And I know that's hard, but that is, I think, the challenge.
We will, of course, stay on top of this issue because, as you said, this isn't going to be the first time that Elon or some Republican billionaire is looking to effectively just purchase a U.S. election. And I think that it's especially important to point it out right now because this is the test case. If they're successful here in Wisconsin after having been successful in the presidential election, then they know that this is a strategy that they can deploy throughout the entire rest of the country. So my message to people who are watching right now is if you live in Wisconsin, if you have friends, family, coworkers, colleagues, anything in Wisconsin, please make sure that not only you turn out on April 1st if you haven't already voted, but that you bring other people and make sure that they vote on April 1st as well for Susan Crawford, and make sure that Donald Trump's preferred candidate of Brad Schimmel gets nowhere near the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Yeah, and let me add something to that because it's important for the viewers to pay attention to this. These off-year elections matter. They are the proving grounds for right. 2026. Everyone will focus on what went wrong in 2024 on the Democratic side or on the Republican side, what went right. But what winds up inevitably happening, and it is usually the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, which will come up in next November. This time, you're right, though, it is starting with a handful of special elections, but most importantly, the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. Everyone is sort of recalibrating and retesting to see what is going to work and not going to work for 2026. And so if Republicans are able to win a state Supreme Court election using this tactic, you will see a lot more of this tactic. If, by the way, in North Carolina, another thing you and I have talked about, where they are still trying to throw out the election results in a state Supreme Court race by throwing out 65,000 votes from people who cast lawful ballots, if they're able to pull that off, we will see that a lot more in 2026. So people really need to pay a lot more attention to elections in 2025 than I feel like they sometimes do, because they think, well, these are just like one-off governorships or one-off state Supreme Court races. But they really are the thing that set the tone for the midterm elections.
Perfectly put. And I know that you've been covering this extensively. For those who are watching right now, to follow along with Marc's coverage and to support fearless independent journalism, the best of it, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.